love that. Okay, I'm a little shorter than you are, Royce. So, thank you so much for having me today. It's a great pleasure to come and get a chance to talk to our transportation friends and partners. A fun fact, just because Royce said I would tell you more about me. I'm from Norman, and I grew up here, and my father had a 40-plus year career at ODOT. So while I graduated as an industrial engineer, the transportation stuff runs deep in my blood. So when we started thinking about student success, and we were thinking about it generally, it made a lot of sense to then start transitioning to thinking about what can we do for transportation workforce. And so that's really kind of what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to talk to you about some of the initiatives at the Gallagher College, and then specifically what we're doing in the transportation workforce. And I would welcome questions. If you want me to stop and answer a question, I don't see this as a very formal talk for you. I'd rather make sure that you get to ask the questions that you are interested in. So really the focus of what I want to talk about is something that we have stood up at OU in the College of Engineering called the Transportation Pathways Alliance. And we're lazy, so we call it TPA. It just makes it a lot easier. I was one of the co-founders of this with my civil engineering friends. I was talking to some of the partners on their board of visitors. They got really excited about some things we were doing. And so then we just launched off on discussions about how we could do this to really support the transportation workforce for the state of Oklahoma. I have since handed it over. Thank goodness, Tommy Bounds, Dr. Bounds is the leader of this program. He's one of the faculty in civil engineering. And so he is definitely close to the students, and he's taking it to the next step and doing great things. He just couldn't be here today. So what is the Transportation Pathways Alliance, or TPA? It's essentially a really big collaboration between academia, industry, and our government partners, all focused around how do we grow the transportation workforce. And again, I keep saying for the state of Oklahoma because we're a public institution and our obligation is to the state. Really, when we think about the College of Engineering, everything that we think about in the college is, well, in my hat, is about how do we help our students be successful? How do we think about exposing kids across the state of Oklahoma to the idea that they could be an engineer? When I was younger, and yes, Tom, Royce, I've been here a long time, thank you for that. When I was younger, nobody came to me and said, hey, have you thought about engineering? Nobody. So I started at university completely without a major, right, undeclared. And I got lucky that I met some engineers and that changed the course of my path. But that shouldn't be the pathway for students these days. We need to help them understand that engineering is an opportunity, a fantastic opportunity, and that transportation specifically makes such an impact that we really believe that this is a great way for them to be an engineer. So our focus is to think about how to grow engineers and specifically those who might be interested in transportation careers. Now this came out of a larger framework that we call engineering pathways, so you can kind of see the connections here. And this was a framework I got to set up about 4 years ago, which really kind of rethinks how we educate students in the College of Engineering. This is a little diagram just kind of showing that our target is to help those students achieve the engineering degrees that they want to achieve. But when we think about this, and we talk about pathways, not pipelines, when we think about this, it has to start well before they even think about going to college. We have to be talking to them back in elementary school, middle school, about the opportunity for them to become an engineer. We have a lot of narratives about you don't have to love math, but math is a tool. So we're really trying to reach the corners of the state and make sure that everybody understands that engineering is an opportunity. We then kind of go down this kind of framework is what I call it. And then of course we think about how do we not just expose them to the ideas of engineering, but engineering at OU. We'll be selfish on that one. But that's not good enough. We don't want to make these great promises to these K-12 students, bring them to OU, and then discover that their academic preparation isn't sufficient to help them succeed. So the thing that we have put into our particular framework that maybe isn't so obvious in others is this idea of transition. Transition is vitally important to student success, particularly as we open the door to more and more students across the state who come from school districts that don't have the same resources, maybe don't offer the same mathematics preparation as some of the big urban schools might. So this transition phase is critical, and we transition over the summer. We have programs through the academic year, and a lot of it is focused on math prep. Sadly, the United States is not doing well in mathematics preparation for our kids. And so when someone comes to me and says, you need to graduate more engineers, I almost just want to throw my hands up because it does rely on a strong mathematical foundation. So that's where we've invested a lot of energy and a lot of resources, is to making sure that if we tell students they can be an engineer, that we're going to support them and give them the resources to be successful. That's kind of that transition phase. Support doesn't end there. Engineering is incredibly exciting and fun and quite challenging at certain points in a student's career. So the idea of support is something that we maintain throughout the student's life with us at university, not just for undergrads. We try to do this for grads too. But we think about support in terms of mentoring, peer tutoring, continuing to provide mathematics reinforcement support. We've really created an ecosystem around engineering where we have a collection of faculty that are focused on teaching. These are professional engineering education faculty that are dedicated and passionate about it. And then we have the faculty that we've hired, some of them are in this room, the new faculty that are dedicated and passionate about teaching, but focused on research-informed teaching. So we've got this ecosystem that's really working. It's really working well for us. Development is what our industry partners ask for, right? Students that graduate with an engineering degree, be it from OU, be it from Nebraska, Lincoln, wherever it is that they're coming from, we tend to have a lot of the same components in our curriculum. We all have the same accreditors. We cover a lot of the core fundamental content. So we have to find a way to differentiate ourselves. And we put a lot of energy and investment into student professional development. It starts at their freshman year, and it continues all the way through to graduation. What this graph actually misses is that we think a lot about transition into the profession. So we have a career development for engineers and scientists program. I don't know if Dawn wants to raise her hand. She's our director of that program. We have a leadership program. We do a lot of work with our students to help ensure that they are ready to go into the workplace. This was the big framework. And now what we've done is we've taken this framework and we've leveraged it to focus on the transportation industry. So we know that transportation engineers, or people working in the infrastructure spaces, are in incredible demand. The Bureau of Labor Statistics is predicting about 5% growth per year, ahead of most of the other engineering disciplines. I pulled a quote for you from, I think, the president of ASCE about the demand for workforce in this space. And so it's kind of our obligation as a state institution to help make sure that we are not falling behind in preparation and supplying the engineers needed in transportation and infrastructure. We know that creativity is critical. We know that systems thinking is critical. And bringing these pieces together through the curriculum, through all of our professional development experiences, and through our engagement with our industry and government partners is critical to making sure that our engineers are well prepared to go out into the workspace. So we think a lot about our partnerships. We think a lot about how they can inform what we do, but particularly what we do in terms of developing our students. So the Transportation Pathways Alliance took us a couple years to get off the ground, as does everything, because we were really talking to state stakeholders, corporate stakeholders, government stakeholders. We were really trying to make sure that everybody thought that this was a critical need and a critical pathway forward for the state of Oklahoma. So we really launched the TPA last fall. We had our kickoff meeting in October with all of our founding partners. One of the first things that we did to start engaging with our partners is to invite them into the classroom invite them into our student orgs, and to really allow that person-to-person engagement so that our students can learn to talk to y'all. Our students can learn how to sell themselves to y'all and really start understanding what does it mean to have a career in transportation and infrastructure. We think that if we can explain that to them, we're going to hook them. We think that transportation and infrastructure is an amazing career opportunity. And so what we're trying to do with our students is not only help them professionally develop, but throw that little fishing rod out there, hook them, and reel them into the transportation industry. So that's really what we're trying to accomplish. One of the ways that the TPA kind of works in this space of development and support is with our Center for Career Development for Engineers and Scientists, the one I asked Dr. Pittenger to raise her hand for. I would say our students are lucky. Dr. Pittenger is a civil engineer with a lot of experience, so she automatically brings that to the way that she mentors and works with students. And so we've been really engaging with corporations and our government friends, both in the TPA space and the CDES space. One of the things that we launched last year was an Oklahoma Engineering Futures Career Fair. So we noticed with the demand for workforce and the a bit challenging job market that in the spring we still had students who hadn't found permanent placement, and we still had companies that needed engineers. So we launched a new career fair, so now we have 2 opportunities for our students, and what's really cool is we have probably 50% of the participants, the employers who come to that, are in the infrastructure and transportation field. So a great opportunity for us to continue to try to help our students transition from their disciplines into the field and careers in transportation. This is a place where we invite participation across TPA. That might be our next slide. Here we go. Whether you represent a local company, whether you represent a government agency, this is where it all comes together to add that value. And it's value to the students, but it's also value to our partners because they're developing the workforce with us. So if you are interested in mentoring, if we have friends who are willing to open up their job sites, open up their offices, help our students understand what it means to work in this space, that's exactly the type of thing that we're looking for. One of the components of the engineering pathworks, getting all my words mixed up, engineering pathways framework in the development space is undergraduate research. And a lot of folks, particularly young students, think, I don't know why I would ever do research. I'm not going to go into a research career. But we really reinforce the ideas that research bring that creativity, that systems thinking, that complex problem solving into their kind of skill set. It's a great way for them to learn about how to think about these kind of problems. So this aspect of engineering pathways and in TPA specifically is where we really have a strong partnership with SPTC. So SPTC is very focused on industry preparation, workforce development, but also then on thinking about how do we prepare the students. And research is one of those very strong vehicles, as you've probably seen with the posters, for helping our students develop and prepare. So what is it that has kept us up at night or has caused us a little bit of pause to think about how we go forward? Well, it is a really interesting challenge when we are working between industry, government, and academe, particularly when we are trying to bring our industry and our government stakeholders into the same space. Early conversations were all about, well, what if they come into this space together and they decide they want to work for you and not me? And so those were real concerns of our partners. But because they could step back and they could look at the bigger picture and they could understand that growth of the transportation workforce is the goal, they've come together to help make these things happen. So it's I'm going to say it's a beautiful thing. It really is pretty cool. Well, hello. The other thing that is always a challenge is students are incredibly busy. And so making sure that we're marketing this to our first-year students. What we want to do is go back a couple years and start letting students know that at the University of Oklahoma, this is what you can do. A couple of really cool success stories this year is that some of our freshman students, one who participated in each of the TPA events, got an internship the summer after her freshman year with one of our partners. Did not set it up, it just happened esoterically, but because of the pattern of programming that we do, she's excited and ecstatic to be able to work towards her career. And then impact, of course. How do we document and measure our impact? That's always critical, because what we want to do is we want to make sure that our partners are seeing the value. And so we have incredible partners. We have commitments to help us move this program forward of time and resources. And so we want to make sure that we're doing the right thing and helping them see that value. So what can you do? What do we ask for future partners and stakeholders? We're always looking for people who are interested in working with students and growing the TPA and helping us prepare our students for transportation workforce. It could be mentoring, it could be guest lecturing, it could be hosting them on your site, it could be buying pizza for these events, right? If I go back here, ODOT really rolled it out and bought some canes that day, so I get a lot of pizza, so that was a nice draw. So it's really kind of critical to think about, where do we start this problem, start attacking this issue of growing the workforce. And so coming together with us and thinking about, how do we get back into that K-12 space? How do we design kind of collaborative recruiting messaging, collaborative recruiting efforts, because it has to start before they even really get to their junior year in high school. There's going to be a booth later. I think Royce might be at the booth. I don't know who's at the booth later. It's not me. Shreya, okay. Shreya's going to be at the booth later. But what I hope you take away from this is the excitement. This is a really cool thing. We started with this grand vision of engineering pathways. It's just a framework. And our first case study, you could call it, is transportation. And so if we can make this successful, this is a great launch pad for other types of workforce development programs as well. So hopefully you have a lot of questions. You want to know more, you can talk to me, talk to Shreya, whoever. But I think I'll invite Royce to come back up at this point. Okay.
So thank you, Dean Shehab. If you'll hang on just a second, I'm going to say a couple of things and then we'll take some questions. And get back to the beginning here. So earlier this morning, I talked a little bit about some of the things that SPTC wants to do relative to extending the life and improving the durability of transportation infrastructure. We had a little short on time to talk about more specifics there, but SPTC does a lot of research. We involve a lot of students in research, and some of those students come through the Transportation Pathways Alliance and work as undergraduate students on research projects. We're currently working to expand those opportunities where students can work with some of the advanced technologies. But I want to tell you about some other things that SPTC is doing in the outreach, technology transfer, and workforce development area. Some of those things include this symposium. We've also had a transportation and extreme weather symposium that was held last year. We have Oklahoma Transportation Research Day in coordination with the Oklahoma DOT, the Oklahoma Summer Transportation Symposium that Dr. Joshua Lee leads. He's here somewhere. And then I have another slide toward the end on the National Summer Transportation Institute, or we're doing this year is the Oklahoma Transportation Institute, which ties in directly with trying to recruit those students before they get to the university campus. Once they're on campus, we have a strong internship program. So the Transportation Regional Internship Program is kind of spearheaded by Dr. Michael Molina, who's back there. I wanted to make sure we hit on this because you may be looking for interns this summer. You may be hiring interns this summer. SPTC has a program where we partially sponsor those interns that are working for your company. It's 10 to 12 weeks in the summer. It's a collaboration between the company and SPTC. The applications are open for 2026, so if you go to the website, there's a form that you can fill out as an employer to participate in that program. And so far, in the first 2 years of our program, we've had more than 100 total interns. So it's been a really successful program helping those students gain some experience. Another example of workforce development is a 3D printing or concrete 3D printing workshop for undergraduate students that Dr. Shreya Vimaganti is leading that's here. It gives students hands-on training in 3D printing and specifically concrete 3D printing, which is one of those new technologies that we want to educate students on, have them prepared to be the workforce of the future. If you look around the room, there are some QR codes that will take you to a video that is really an excellent video on this. Maybe we can show it during the break. We don't have time right now, unfortunately. But again, trying to prepare those students for the future. And then I mentioned earlier, the National Summer Transportation Institute was held last summer on campus. Dr. Ashik Ali and Dr. Dominique Pittenger led that. Dom is here. I know Ashik was. But this year, we're doing that again. All right. Last year, we had a 2-week program where high school students came in. They did sessions learning about asphalt and concrete testing, traffic engineering. They went on site visits. They got to visit bridge design professionals. They got to get out and get their hands dirty and see how the transportation industry works as a high school student. This year, we're doing that as a 1-week program, but if you know high school students that are interested in math, science, engineering, anything that might be related, please encourage them to come see us. And then the last thing, you've seen Kevin around. We recognized him at lunch. He is currently coordinating an industry consortium. We have a few members so far, about 5 companies that have either joined or in the process. Some of those are affiliated with TPA as well, some are not. But this consortium specifically provides funding for applied research that can involve students. We kind of envision that being used to support undergraduate students in coordination with TPA. So that those students can find out what they might be interested in the transportation industry. And then, kind of an idea that's been thrown out there that we've talked about a lot is, what if we were to develop an Oklahoma test track that would be another place where students could get out, get practical experience, and new technologies could be tested. All right, so those are just a few things that SPTC is doing, kind of in coordination with the TPA, with the College of Engineering. We can take a couple of minutes for questions if anybody has those, either for Dr. Shehab or myself.
Yes, Dr. Shehab and also Royce. We focus very heavily on transportation engineering today, which is critical to me and to everyone. But transportation involves a lot of disciplines. It's becoming much more interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary all the time. When you think about the complexity of a huge transportation project, all the way from its inception to its end, so many disciplines need to be involved. We were just talking earlier today how critical GIS and geoscience skills have become. So in terms of the overall workforce effort, can you give me a vision for how to include other disciplines other than transportation?
Thank you for that question and kind of pointing out that we honed in very narrowly today. You're absolutely correct. When we think about the transportation or infrastructure networks, it is an incredibly multidisciplinary problem, not just engineering, and certainly not just civil engineering, but much broader. So the TPA had to start somewhere, but the goal is not that it is only a civil engineering program, it's to encourage folks to go out into the transportation industry. We have our first hire in the college that is a split appointment, a transportation engineer between civil engineering and industrial engineering, so doing a lot of the network modeling and things. So we are recognizing that and trying to build towards that, and hopefully the TPA can then start reaching those arms out and making sure other students get an opportunity to participate. Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, and I would say from the SPTC side, I actually have a couple of slides of where we have, looked across the university at the different disciplines that, have faculty doing research in transportation or have part of their programs that direction. And, our center includes individuals from 5 different colleges on the OU campus. And so we do have, some of those folks from the geosciences and the College of Earth and Energy and weather and climate science, trying to bring those folks together to develop a program that addresses some of those other needs beyond the core civil engineering side of transportation.
Are other universities in the state participating in the TPA, or is it just OU?
We have set this up out of the University of Oklahoma for now. They could borrow our model if they were interested. I think one of the really common threads is that the Oklahoma Department of Transportation is incredibly connected to both campuses, growing their design squad on both campuses. And so if anybody served as kind of that focal point or that thread between the two schools, I would say it's probably our connections to ODOT. But in terms of the activities on campus, we haven't merged those at this time.
So this question for both of you, maybe Dean Shihab for you in particular. Transportation Pathways Allowance is a great program, but these also, I brought this up in one of our panel earlier today, workforce development. We always try to track successes, right? But then in these type of programs, how do we really find out students who joined in the beginning, but then they drop out? How you are tackling that situation?
That is always the challenging question of education, right? Because once a student decides to disengage, they have to engage for us to get that information out of them. So this is something that's been a problem in education research for years. So what we try to do is, and I did this with a group of colleagues really early on, is not worry necessarily about what pushes kids out, focus on what we know keeps them in. That's the group that we can identify and understand and control. And so when we think about some of the early work that my team and others have done, it's really focused on student success, understanding what drives success, what drives motivation. You could almost say happiness, but motivation is a pretty good word in engineering. And that's really the framework on pathways. Let's think about all that we know that keeps students with us, and that's how we can crack that problem. So, because that other data are just really hard and incomplete.
So I'm interested in your internship program, and I'm a contractor. And internally, we struggle with what we think interns should do. From your guys' perspective, what would you expect your interns to learn or do, at least from a contractor's community or even a civil engineering community? What would you want them to learn or do?
It's a great question. I mean, from my personal experience, I would want them to learn and do the things that are going to help you be successful later on if you hired them to work for you full time. But specific things, some of them have been mentioned earlier today. I teach our construction management intro class, so kind of fitting with the things that you're talking about. And having students be able to understand, a set of plans is something that they don't really get in school. They don't get a lot of interaction with plan sets. They don't get a lot of interaction with specifications. They really don't get much of an introduction into the back and forth on RFIs and submittals and all those kinds of things that go into construction. And so just being able to see some of those things in real time and in their job is going to benefit them as they come back to our classes and our learning those topics on the fundamental side, if they've seen how those practically apply, it's going to help them in their education. And, the amount of comfort that you have with giving students responsibility, is kind of up to you. But, similarly to what the capstone group said, the students are really sometimes more innovative in their thinking than even we are. And, they are able to accomplish a lot more than you would think sometimes. And so I would encourage you to give them some real responsibility when you bring them on as an intern.
I think Royce hit everything on the head. The one thing that I would just add in a more general sense is make sure that their work, they understand the value of their work. Going to an internship and feeling like you're not really doing anything that contributes. And I get it, as a freshman, there's less of a skill set that they can bring. So what can you show them about the future? What can you show them that they can look forward to? And exposing them to the concepts is a great way to do that, but make sure that they understand that, while they may not be able to contribute fully as a, just as a rising sophomore, what does it look like for them as they keep going forward?
All right, so we'll take a quick question, and then we need to move on to our next panel.
So the architect students or urban planning or other these all, you consider them for the internship?
So I would say on the internship side, most of that is going to be dictated by the company and what the company is looking for specifically. But I think there are a lot of those possible internships where those students would be good candidates. So I would encourage them to look at, if you go to the SPTC website, you can see what companies are involved, and we encourage them to go connect with those companies, but have them look into it.
Do you consider international students as well?
It depends on if they, again, it has a lot to do with what the company is willing to support, but a lot of times there are ways for those international students to work while they're in school. Yeah. All right, so thank you, Dean Shihab.